Welcome to Movies That Matter, the podcast about recent films going above and beyond the call of box office returns to boldly explore a social issue affecting people's lives. I'm Nicole Finari.
And I'm Garret Schellenhammer.
And what movie are we overanalyzing this week?
Dolittle.
After his wife's death, Dr. Dolittle, played by Robert Downey Jr., decided to hide from the world with his beloved animals. But he has to take a journey to a mysterious island to find a healing tree, which is the only medicine that can help the dying queen in Buckingham Palace. What did we think of Dolittle? We're going to buck the critics' trend.
This was terrible.
Yeah, I mean, I legit,
I wanted to walk out of the theater.
I feel guilty as a reviewer because I'm pretty sure, I might have nodded off a little bit in the middle of the movie.
I'm so sick of being, and we knew going into this movie it would be more children friendly, right?
We've done lots of kids movies.
I don't know who we made mad to start off 2020 with a bad movie, but it was just absolutely terrible. And this is what happens when you change directors halfway through a movie and they come in and shoot things and do things differently and change all the writing and it was, gosh, I literally sat, I think, playing on my phone most of the movie.
Oh, no! In the theater?
I was alone, so.
Oh, okay.
But it was...
It was bad.
It was one of those things, I didn't need to give it attention because there was no plot. I didn't need to give it attention because there was no acting in the movie whatsoever. I could have watched a 10-minute short about this movie and been oh, that was really cute.
Yeah, I mean, you waste at least a good five minutes trying to figure out whose voices those are, right? So that gets you through the first 5 minutes of all the animals, and you're like, oh, whose voice is that? But then, I mean, there's a lot to, pick apart about this movie. I think, first and foremost, speaking of the voices, this actually took up a lot of my attention because I couldn't figure it out. Robert Downey Jr.
Oh, his potential Welsh accent?
It literally sounded so disconnected from his body. It was like the whole thing was dubbed. Somehow it just didn't seem the audio just didn't seem to line up. And I kept thinking, is it slightly out of sync? Is that what I don't understand? Did they dub it in so he could talk to all the animals and they just filmed, laid the audio track over the film? It didn't seem like a live performance somehow.
It was the most disturbing part about the movie.
Yeah.
I think. It's I mean, fine, be Welsh, I don't care. Even do a poor Welsh accent. But this one felt so disjointed and disconnected that nothing he said was ever the same. And so I was like, was this in the same take? You said the word differently twice.
Yeah.
And I'm like, what is this? It was the most disturbing part about it and why I was like, I couldn't get over it.
No, me neither. The whole movie. And I'm sitting here is it the room tone is different when he talks? I'm just sitting there thinking as much audio engineering as I've done, I'm certainly not an expert, but I was like, something doesn't match. The words coming out of his mouth don't seem to match what I'm watching on the screen, and I can't, it never improved.
Yeah. And I don't know who approved him to say that this is a acceptable Welsh accent.
And why even do it?
I mean, just because he's in England doesn't mean he has to have, the worst accent of, a person who has never seen people for years. None of it made sense.
And then can we talk about the random American accents on all the other animals, which I found
fascinating,
problematic and weird in and of itself. I'm like, okay, a duck can be from America. I get that. But the gorilla?
Or a polar bear?
And are there ostriches in India? Because I thought they were in Africa. So why do they have kumia? I just found I was thinking about, again, you had a lot of time to think about these things because nothing was really happening on screen that was worth watching. I just kept thinking, how would I do this so that it wasn't racist? But either have them all have English accents. I don't know. It just didn't make, the accents didn't connect to the animals and the animals origin stories. Yeah. And was make the polar bear have a fake, I don't know, fake.
A fox with a French accent. I didn't understand.
Right.
I don't really know much about foxes in France, but I'm going to guess it's not as common as we think.
Yeah, I don't know why the fox was French. I just And I was like, you know, like I said, for something like the polar bear, like do a Deanna Troi, just like make up an accent that is no accent, because like who knows how polar bears would talk. It just was like,
it was, the voicing was not the worst part about the movie, but it was the most distractible part for sure. Noticeable between all the animals, noticeable between Robert Downey Jr. And like he could have nailed this part. And instead, I just felt like he kind of went into it, was like, I'm Robert Downey Jr., I'm here just because I'm Robert Downey Jr., instead of taking years of playing, like, if he would have acted the same way like he had acted in Sherlock Holmes, just manic and crazy and just kind of off the edge rocker, I thought it'd do that with Dolittle and you would have been better. But he was, like, super intense about all of his acting. I was like, okay, we left Tony Stark behind in the cinematic universe, okay? It's time that we move past that.
Yeah. And like two fronts, they all just definitely sounded like they recorded their own parts in their own studios whenever they had time, which is usually how these things are done, but you don't want it like to sound like that, you know what I mean? And this again is where I think CGI can often be a fail somehow. It's hard to interact with CGI, you know, like people who aren't there. Right. And I don't think he carried that part off. There didn't seem any connection between him and the animals. And I would actually say the little boy actor did a lot better job.
Yeah. Well, that's just it. I think part of what I was frustrated about Robert Downey Jr.'s acting was, like, he never shared screen time with anybody.
Right.
So it's hard to get a, like, good acting when you don't share screen time with anybody. And what I'm sure in the studio were props he looked at and spoke to a stuffed polar bear or talked to a stuffed parrot. You know what I mean? Like, there was I felt that. And you can tell that there's no. And so when it came time to interact with the little boy on screen, I was like, you've probably spent maybe a day doing this.
Yeah.
And that's it.
Yeah. Yeah. And I don't know if you've seen His Dark Materials on HBO. One of the things that I really like about that show, just to set up for people who aren't familiar with the source material or with the HBO series, every human being in this world has a soul that's sort of given physical form in some type of animal. And so there's just a lot of, like, kind of random animals on screen as you see demons, as they call it. And one of the things I really loved about this presentation of His Dark Materials was how well they animated the demons. So, like, just there are moments when, like, two characters are talking and you kind of see the, like, demon, like, lean in a little bit. You know what I mean? Like, they even when they're human, even when they're not talking, they're not necessarily still. They just sort of interact and seem present in the scene. And so when I saw this movie after just coming off of that, I was like, oh wow, you really didn't meet that bar at all. Like, the animals were wacky or they were just not present. Like, they didn't capture, like, what it would be like to have human and animals, like, interacting as well as they did Dark
Especially
Materials.
Because they marketed all the animals to have something wrong with them, right? Like a gorilla that has anxiety and fear.
Mm-hmm.
But you didn't market the gorilla other than, like, some overly exaggerated anxiety tendencies. You know what I mean? You didn't, like, get those little subtleties, like the furrow of a brow or, like, the quivering of a lip or something like that. Instead, you just have him roll over and, like, throw its hands in the air like, oh no, it's terrible. But it just, I sat through the movie and I was like, oh, okay, maybe the plot will get a little better.
The plot made no sense.
But
I had no idea what was happening.
But I thought the two
And not because I fell asleep.
I thought the two actors who did the best were minor characters. I thought Antonio Banderas, like, stole that scene completely as, like, a traitor, a king of traitors and thieves. Like, I thought he rocked that part. And he was on screen for maybe 5 minutes. Like,
yeah.
But I just was kind of like...
I actually thought Ralph Fiennes did a great job as that tiger as well.
Oh, yes.
Like, that whole... of all the voice acting, I was like, who was that tiger? Because I didn't recognize his voice. And then when the credits rolled, I was like, Ralph Fiennes, wow. Not phoning it in at all. He did a very good job with that. That was like one of the few scenes that I was, like, having fun with. Yeah, because it was like that's what it was, though. He was displaying human emotion in such a way, like, this tiger is having a crisis where, you know, he doesn't feel loved by his mother. And so he's, like,
Dr. Dolittle is his therapist, and he's like fanning over himself in like this melodramatic soliloquy, and it was just like that was enjoyable to watch.
It was silly and it was good.
But like, where was that the rest of the movie?
No, and there were like pockets of like whimsy, like the way it was filmed and like kind of the art direction / CGI of the whole thing, where they were like odd. So I'm actually just going to pause here for a second and mention that we're doing the best we can. We seem to have every siren possible going by. There's construction outside. If you hear a lot of random noise, we do the best we can. So please just try to pay attention to our voices, and I'll do the best I can in post-production. So yeah, there were like pockets of whimsy and like, you know, the house and the way the house is made. The costume design, though, like, fell a little short somehow. Like, I think because the mix of whimsy and real life didn't...
Well, and they, like, if he's going to be a crazy doctor, give me a beautifully tattered coat that is patchworked all over.
Right.
Give me a hat that's better than a straw. Like, it looks like I bought it at a dollar store. Give me something, you know what I mean? And, like, I thought his best costume was when he was sitting in the house in that big overcoat, the yellow, like... flowers and paisley.
Yeah.
Like, I was like, oh, this is gonna be great. Like, this is gonna be... And they put him in, like, basically a trench coat. Like, a tan trench coat.
And then, like, his pants had stuff on it for a while, and you were like, where did that stuff come from? Yeah. I don't know. Like I said, I had just seen Little Women, and I was like, they're supposed to be poor. Like, well, how do they have all these, like, colorful clothes and whatnot?
No.
Like, horrible brown cloth is gonna be a lot cheaper than, like, this, you know, bright blue. Yeah, It was just, like... You just wanted it to look pretty, and, like, it doesn't really add up to anything.
Or I wanted it to be so over-the-top crazy.
Yeah, where you just suspend disbelief.
Yeah, you're just like, oh, okay. Like, but, again, there was, like, nothing... The plot was terrible, you know? Like, it could have been really great to get this, like, journey about, like, self-recovery, you know, about losing a spouse and, like, really trying to find yourself again. And it could have been this wonderful journey. But it was mixed in with such... terrible cut and snip humor, like giving a colonic to a dragon.
Yeah, I was just gonna say that was like the true nadir of it all was when we entered into like the scatological, right? Like there's no, and it's like, oh, kids like farts. Like, guys, come on.
But like, I was in the theater by myself and I was just like, ugh. Like, fart jokes are funny, sure, for kids, but like, we spent a good 10 minutes on giving a dragon a colonic, and I was like,
yeah,
this, you know, and because they had swallowed armor and things, and like, you think if it's a dragon that superheats things, their stomach would also superheat whatever. But it just was like, I was even okay. It was like, okay, we found a dragon. Okay, here's the children's movie. But then it was like, we took it a step further to spend belief even more and be like, how can the doctor help a dragon? And like,
how does he learn dragon language that quickly? Like,
right.
That was pretty instantaneous. Must have been nice.
I also did not appreciate there was, like, you know, subtle adult humor that you could tell they threw in. Like, when the ostrich one time was like, oh, my father said I should have been an omelet. Like...
Yeah.
It's like, okay, kids aren't going to get that joke, but, yeah. Like, you try to, like, slip in adult humor because you knew adults would be watching this movie, but it wasn't delivered in a way that was... funny. It was just kind of like, oh, that's a little dark.
It's dark, yeah.
Like,
yeah, no, it was just sort of the worst. All we have to do is have talking animal, and then we'll have a kid audience type of.
But I'm not even sure kids are going to like it.
No, I don't know why they would, because kids are actually more discerning than that. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, like there wasn't even enough plot for a child. I don't feel like to be like, because it was so disjointed. Scene. And, like, there's no real villain other than someone trying to poison a queen. Like, that was, like, odd. I mean, we all saw it coming, right? But, like, just odd.
Yeah, poor Michael Sheen was doing his best to be a villain, but then he wasn't enough in the movie, and you didn't, like, yeah. It didn't work. Yeah, like, saving the queen, you were like, I'm not English, so, like, the queen can die and I don't care. You know what I mean? Like, there's no reason to care whether or not she lived or died, like...
But, like, the queen had an heir, and so this whole, like, power circumventing, like, she was trying to... You know, they were not... The House of Lords were going to, like, take power over, like, the rightful heir. It was like, that's not how things work. Like, so it was just... The movie was left more to be desired, and... the person I felt the worst for in the whole film was the little boy, because like there could have been a great story about making him an apprentice and making him feel welcomed and everything, and he never got that in the entire movie. He got like little spurts of like, okay, this is fine, but there was never like a welcoming moment where it was like, oh, I really do appreciate you, thank you, how can I teach you?
Yeah, it was very like, from a kid's perspective, if that's like their audience surrogate, it was very much like, here's like a distant and unloving father to go along with his family that doesn't like understand him. And I was like, the psychology of this doesn't really add up too great for this poor kid. Like,
and the fact that like the whole premise that I couldn't deal with the squirrel either. Like the squirrel who was like a battle torn, like captain's log, over commentary and narration.
Yeah, who was the captain's log stuff for?
Himself?
I mean, like, how many people, like, I'm like, a Star Trek joke in the middle of a kid's movie? Like, who is going to get that? Like, what is the point of that? Like, yeah, I agree.
The squirrel, I thought, became a pointless entity, and
it was just an annoyance.
Just became like its own, like, and it didn't bring anything to the plot. It didn't bring anything to the children. Like, there wasn't funny jokes in his, like, little comments or anything. Like, and I was like, what
again, he never interacted with anybody. There was, like, very little interaction. Yeah, there was just a lot of, like, people giving a performance into the void, it felt like. And the squirrel was probably, you're right, the worst example of that.
And I felt bad for Emma Thompson as the parrot.
Me too.
I was like...
She was better.
She carried that whole movie on her back. She was the narrator. Carried the whole movie on her back, and her voice was very warm, very welcoming. I thought, like, her voice fit the parrot really well. But at the same time, I was like, you didn't do anything with her. Like...
Yeah, again.
Wasted talent.
At the same time, you're like, why, Emma, why? Like, I mean, make Bank Girl, like, if that's what you got to do another late night, for sure, get it done. But yeah, it was just sort of, like, embarrassing for everybody involved.
And I feel bad for, like, parents who are going to have to watch this movie, for, like, young kids who just want to see animals on screen, period, who probably won't be cognitively aware. But, like, I don't think that... It was meant to be for, I would say, probably 7 to, like, 13-year-olds, this movie. But I feel like 4-year-olds are going to latch onto this movie just because it's got talking animals. And I feel bad the parents are going to sit there and watch it back to back to back.
So just don't introduce it to them. Problem solved. So, I don't know. I did a little research because I was curious. I actually read the Dr. Dolittle books when I was a kid. It turns out the author started the whole concept as letters he was writing to his kids from the War One, because he didn't have anything. Like, it was kids. Like, he couldn't tell them what was actually going on. Plus, he probably didn't want to, the less time spent thinking about it, the better. So he, like, invented Dr. Dolittle, and he put them in these letters to his kids. And then eventually, when he got home, he wrote the books. And so there have been a number of adaptations over the years. They came out in, like, the 20s. And so it's been a somewhat enduring story. But like I said, I read them as a kid, and I only came to find out that, in fact, they're, like, super racist and imperial. I mean, it was written by an English person at the turn of the century. Like, they're bad. They're bad, bad, bad. Like, kids can't read them. And they've had to make adaptations extremely far from the source material because they're, like, really not. They're so problematic, like, they almost can't be redeemed. And
that's what, like, I thought maybe we were going to move forward in this movie. And, like, because the original title of the film was The Voyage of Dolittle. Mm-hmm. So it's moving away from him and all these previous stories. And that's what the story picks up here. It, like, tries to move away from the past. And, like, all the stories of how they got there. And pretty problematic. But, like, we already had all the characters set now. And now they were just going on adventures. And so the whole movie was supposed to be about a voyage. And the tree of, like, the tree of life got reintroduced. It felt like Journey to the Center of the Earth, basically, is what I was watching. Just add a new monster here and a new this here. And instead, it was really supposed to be a, like, voyage about following his wife's last footsteps and, like, what she did and what she went through and how he could connect to her. And I was like, that would have been so much better. Like, what great movie could that have been to show kids, like, hey, if you lose a parent, what it's like for mommy or daddy or, whoever, your caregiver, to lose somebody that you love. But that we never got any of that. And it just became this disjointed, like, okay, I think we're going to film this scene, this scene, this scene, this scene. And then how we tie them all together, I don't know. Let's just make a cut scene and call it a day.
Yeah, and I think another central theme of the movie too, and of the like character of Dr. Dolittle, is that, you know, this is a person who very strongly relates better to animals than he does to people, to such the extent that he can actually talk to them, right? But you know, like, and that's a pretty relevant theme for today's kids. Like, as I feel like as more and more, so like, look, I don't care what your opinions are on everybody having a support animal, right? Like, I don't. But legitimately, there's been a lot of research and new developments in having kids on the autism spectrum having a support animal and having them be able to relate to an animal in a way that they can't in beings. And there's been, you know, and it's like, you know, all the pet care stuff, like bringing animals into nursing homes and how much better it is for people to like have, you know, a dog or a cat to pet. And it's like, there's something to be said for people who are, I'm not thinking of a good catch-all, or like traumatized or, you know, have some social anxiety or whatever the thing is that makes it difficult for them to relate to people, being able to have a sense of companionship by having an animal companion. And like, they never, because again, like he never warms up to the kid. Like they don't really explore that, like the twin themes of like, yeah, grief and how you overcome it, and how like our sense of relating to animals can also start to improve our ability to relate to people.
No. He never got past the point of instead of growing from the animals, he minimalized himself to be one. And didn't ever avoided all human contact after that point. Right. Which could have been a really great movie. But it just, the themes that we're talking about, we're pulling out, are like not captured well. No. And that's what, like, I don't know how to, like, I feel like when we watched Christopher Robin, at least we related to each of the stuffed animals, even though they weren't real. We really, like, were moved by them, right? Like, and there were times both you and I were like, I felt really sad for the stuffed animal. I felt really sad for Christopher Robin. But this was kind of just like, he didn't care to want to try. He was like, I'm totally happy living as a recluse for 7 years with my animals. I don't want any human interaction. And then all it takes him is like a sudden jolt from a little girl saying the queen is dying. Like, you might lose your land. It didn't seem like it was like, what was the big pull there? Other than she's the queen. But like, we didn't see him show a lot of favoritism towards the queen. So like, if there was a pool, it was like, oh my God, it's about England and country. And like, I want to save my country and do what's better for my country. I wanted something from that. If it was because I used to love the queen, or if it was because I like helping people. Like, there was none of that. It was just like, okay, I guess I'll do it.
I'm glad you brought up Christopher Robin. And in fact, you know, a lot of children's literature, and Dr. Dolittle is a kid's book as well, like features talking animals, human and animal characters interrelating. And one of the things like that, just the book of Christopher Robin, and even the movie as well, like does so well, is like when you think about the animals in Dolittle, you're right. Like, they each are supposedly have their sort of like issue that they're trying to deal with, which we all know about, you know, the characters from the 100 Acre Wood, right? Right. Winnie the Pooh is dumb and doesn't think of consequences and kind of needs to be able to like plan ahead, you know. Piglet is like the ball of anxiety, and Eeyore is like the really cynical, sad, always see this, you know, glass half empty side of things. And like, all of those things are just into the characters, and they're a way for kids to like kind of see their own issues, like, and relate to them and watch a character work through them without it being so close and so personal as being another child, right? Like being another human being. I was doing some research on like why some of the science was saying like, because kids need something that they can relate to, but not overly identify with. Yeah. Exactly. And it's like in this movie, like it really failed. And I think the movie does a disservice to children into acting like, you know, just dumb comedy is enough.
But there wasn't even that much comedy, which is
well, yeah, and the comedy was bad.
And like, if it was dumb comedy, I could have been like, okay, this is a children's movie for children with like children's jokes in it. I think that it's important that kids understand, you know, those metaphors but the conversations that come after those, like, I think when, why is Piglet always anxious? I think or why is Eeyore always sad? Things that they can understand and be like, well, I think that's where we need to be better about, like, oh, well, Eeyore's sad because sad things happen. This, and this. And people can be sad too. So kids pick up on the themes. That's not the issue. It's how we approach them after the issue. Mm-hmm. And so I think it is important to have, like, animals, dolls, toys. I mean, this is the whole premise of Toy Story, right? Like,
yeah, no, that's a good point.
Kids can relate because they're toys. But I think if we're only doing the toys and the animals and the talking things without the lip service to this is real life too, I think kids lose that until they get older and you look back and you're like, oh, I really related with this toy or this animal because of this. Why didn't anybody ever, like, ask me about it? I don't know.
So, I was thinking, like I said, I read Dr. Dolittle. I'm an animal hater. Just not an animal person. I never want to go to the zoo or an aquarium. Obviously, I have a cat that I love, but I love her because she's my cat. Like, I'm not really into that animals that much, and I didn't like them as a kid that much. So I was thinking about, like, sort of kids' books and animals. And I was just never attracted to that as a theme. But my favorite picture book, which I still have a copy of, is a book called Bear by Himself. And it's just Bear, a little, like, drawn and bear, like, just doing stuff in solitude, like, lying on a hill, enjoying the sun on his face. Like, and I was like, that was my favorite book, and it's so cute how it's drawn. And I was like, that was, like, the only one. But I think it was just because Bear was just doing human stuff, like, but looked like a cute bear. So I'll ask you, do you have a favorite kids' books with animals from your childhood?
Kids with animals. I mean, Is Your Mama a Llama? I don't know if you've ever read that book. It's a short bedtime story, but it's about this baby llama who goes around, like, trying to find his mother. And so he goes to all these animals. He's like, are you my mother? And it's like teaching, like, oh, you have feathers, you have beaks, you have fins. Like, he goes and talks to all these animals. And he's like, well, nobody looks like me. And then finally at the end of the book, he finds his mother. And he goes, are you my mother? And she's like, yes, we're both llamas. And I'm your mother. And I always will be. And just a cute children's book. But I actually really enjoyed stuff like The Very Hungry Caterpillar.
Yeah. But did you read any of the Beatrix Potter? Did you read Winnie the Pooh or Beatrix Potter and all that stuff?
I read Winnie the Pooh, I think, when I was older. Probably. Okay. Not when I don't know if there's a lot of, like, animals other than, like, when I was a teenager, Animorphs was a big thing. But again, I didn't grow up in a wealthier household, so I didn't have access to a lot of, like, animal type literature, because a lot of the books that would come down would be, either secondhand or something like that. And so I didn't grow up with a lot of, like, stuff like that, but I grew up with a lot of, like, real kinds of, I grew up on a farm, so I grew up with, like, animals. Actual animals.
That's
and, like,
interesting.
So, like, all my books about, I was obsessed with horses for a long time when I was a kid. So I had a lot of books on, like, about horses themselves, not about, like, a horse character.
Okay.
And so, but I also was taught very different growing up about how animals were and what pets look like. And, pets were not allowed in the house, and pets were an outside thing, and pets were something you took care of with the rest of the farm work.
Interesting.
It wasn't like a companion like I've seen going forward.
No, you raise a good point, like the city versus rural, like, where, is it harder for you to anthropomorphize a duck when you're like, see it, a duck or like a cow and you're like, it's a cow. It doesn't talk. It's a working animal and provides milk. When it's like, it's hard to anthropomorphize, like, animals that you actually see and interact with who in fact don't have any of these human characteristics and don't wear clothes.
Right. And I think that's why when I was a kid, I was really obsessed with, like, exotic animals because there were things I didn't see a lot. So I had tons of, like, jungle sets. I remember I was really into jungle animals because those are things I could never tangibly see.
Oh, I read the Jungle Book too now that you're talking about it.
Yeah, and like I think I grew up with like those kind of movies. Like The Rescuers Down Under is probably the best example. I don't have.
Oh, I love The Rescuers.
Or The Rescuers Down Under. Those are things I identify with animals doing like helpful things and being more human-like, though, than I really connected probably with literature as I was growing up. Because, you know, my favorite kids' book is like Goodnight Moon.
Oh, Goodnight Moon's a classic.
And so like, you know, it was not really animal focused, but I think my first experience was really like probably animated movies where animals were a large part.
Yeah, I think it's funny. My favorite book is Alice in Wonderland, and that's a world where anything and anything can be animate, right? You have cars, you have chess pieces, you have flowers, you have animals,
right.
You know, you have the Cheshire Cat, like you have unicorns, you have all kinds of things that interact with Alice along her journey. And in a way, like almost the whole world is sentient, which is what makes it fun because you never know what's going to be. And they also are just incongruous. Like she never knows how they're, like what they mean or how they're going to talk or, but yeah, I mean, I think I generally liked stuff that was just like, if the animals were just people, then it was like in their world, kind of like The Rescuers versus like, I don't think that I got a lot out of animal-human interaction stories, but.
Neither did I.
Yeah.
Maybe that's why we're so messed up today.
Clearly. But I do, and so it was like, it's an interesting thing to me, because I'm like, they clearly resonate. Like, this is clearly like so many kids' books, so many kids' things have animals in them. And actually, I read this a long time ago. It was a story about how they made Sesame Street and how like all the child development experts at the time were like, this is never going to, you cannot mix puppets and real people. The kids will be confused. You either have to have it all puppets or all real people. Like, it was the first time they'd ever done that. And they were like, kids will not get this. This is a bad idea. And of course, the kids had zero issue with the puppets and the real people.
And I think that's a lot as we do as adults, is we like try to tell kids, we try to plan for kids what they're going to be into. Mm-hmm. And sometimes kids just want to like see something and enjoy it just for enjoyment's sake. Versus adults, we have to be like, there has to be a purpose. You have to like this thing because this thing will work better and da-da-da-da-da.
Or has a moral message that I want you to gravitate towards.
Right. And I think like with this movie, it didn't need to have a moral message, right? It didn't need to.
No. Yeah. I was just going to say, I don't advocate for that. Like, not everything. Kids can just have a fun thing that they enjoy. Like,
but if it's not going to have a moral movie, make it visually appealing.
Yeah, exactly.
Make it comedic in some way. Like if it's not powerful and uplifting, make it funny then, please. Like do something with it. And that's where I feel like this movie just missed all of its marks because it didn't do anything for children. It didn't do anything for adults. And I kind of think they just rushed to make it to get Robert Downey Jr. his movie quota for the year.
Yeah, I'm not sure. I'm not sure. Like, I think that, again, that's a good point. It comes through of, like, why did they make this movie? Yeah. What was in it for Robert Downey Jr.? Like, he executive produced it, so he had some hand in, like, making sure this happened. And you were like, why? Because you didn't seem to enjoy any part of this. Like,
I don't know that he enjoyed it, looking at it.
That's what I'm saying. Yeah. He doesn't seem to enjoy it at all. And it was like, what were you originally drawn to about this? Because, again, I mean, it can be... It's not the first time anybody sort of imagined talking to animals. That's not a new or novel concept. Like, it's something that, you know, again, something that's sort of in the human consciousness, especially for kids. Like, what a fun thing it would be. We could talk to animals. Again, as an adult, you know, you're kind of like, I think my cat would just be like, is it playtime? No. But now is it playtime? Okay, but it's playtime now, right? Like, I don't think she'd be very interesting. Like, right. But as a kid, I think there's like a sense of like wanting to talk to animals, and Dr. Dolittle's and it's a pretty enduring story. This is like at least the third film adaptation of it over the years.
I thought it was interesting for the first time, and this is probably where we could close, but like, I thought it was interesting for the first time they explained him talking to animals in a very approachable and unique way.
Yeah.
Which is actually the most realistic way, I think because, you know, they always imagine Dr. Dolittle can just talk to animals normally. Right. In his human tone, and they understand him and they talk back. This was the first one I'd ever seen where he was speaking the animal's language itself, and he had mastered that. And then, so every time he's like speaking to a gorilla, it's ooh, ooh, ah, hey, ah, yeah. Ooh, not in human language, and they transpose it later,
right?
So you can make it clear that but they do cuts to remind you all the time that he's squawking like a parrot to talk to the parrot,
right?
Or roaring like the polar bear.
Yeah, and that actually is in the book. In the book, the parrot helps him learn like all the other animals' language because the parrot can obviously speak human. But yeah, no, I agree. That was the one thing that I thought was interesting and good about the movie was that like he actually relates to them in their language.
Them speaking English.
Which was very much a departure from Eddie Murphy, Dr. Dolittle, which took it as sort of now we have the what women want and what men want, where suddenly one day he wakes up and he can understand animals. There was no effort But then again, I'm sort of like, animals communicate non-verbally? Anyway. But, so, if we're hard-pressed to give it a social impact score, and the scale goes from 1 to 10, I mean...
0.5.
Yeah, I was like, I always want to like give it less than a 1 when it's a kid's movie.
There was no social impact. They missed the boat. They could have talked about one thing that they could have done. Anything, but they didn't. So there's no social impact score here. I'm really sorry we had to sit through this movie. I would rather it sat through Serenity or... Again,
it's still not beating my all-time low bar of Tarzan. But yeah.
So yeah, social impact score, not great for this one.
Yes. So recommendations for the week.
When there's nothing really to discuss about the movie, it's hard to pick out a recommendation that relates to the movie whatsoever.
You can pick one. You're not limited by that means. You can actually recommend something that has nothing to do with the movie if you so choose.
But I thought if you wanted, and you actually already covered it, which is interesting because I might be stealing your recommendation, to watch his Dark Materials, to read the books.
The books, yeah.
I think on audio, I think they're stunningly well done because they are all narrated. It's an audio drama, so the voices are narrated by different people. But I think it does a really good job and if you watch any, except for the film adaptation, The Golden Compass, please do not watch the film adaptation.
Yeah, no, that one was crap.
But the HBO series, Dark Materials, is really good. I think it does a great job of actually capturing talking animals, human emotions, really showing some like real engagement you can have with a CGI animal portrayal. I
agree. I also think that I was pleasantly surprised as someone who had read the books, and I read them as an adult, so I don't have like a childhood love for them. But I thought the series was just close enough to the book that I wasn't like, wow, you changed that,
Yeah.
But far enough away in how it set up the plot that it wasn't so predictable that I was bored. I mean, obviously I knew it was going to happen and what we were all leading up to, but like I could enjoy the ride because the storytelling was told in a different enough way to keep me engaged. I actually I thought a lot about this and I was like, I agree with you. Like I was like, I couldn't come up with a recommendation based on this movie or the theme of animals. But I will say like, I heard something this week and I just thought if I wanted to sort of share it out to everybody, which is, so I've mentioned the podcast Song Exploder before. There's an episode on Semi-Somic's Closing Time, which is that song, it's like the last call song in every bar around the world. So it's one of those things where I'm like, as, Gen X as I am, I'm like, everyone can relate. Everyone's heard that song. Absolutely. I don't want to spoil anything. There's just like such a great story behind that song. And it's not all what you think it is. And some of the lines that you are like, that line never made sense to me will suddenly make sense to you. So check out that episode of Song Exploder. It's really fun.
Yeah. And I think my last recommendation would be, if you're wanting to build imagination with your kids and they like animals and they want to do talking animals, take them to a zoo, take them to an aquarium, take them to a sanctuary, whatever you choose, and make up stories with the animals. Like, oh, what do you think they're saying to each other? Like, have imaginary dialogue with kids. I think so many times parents are let's go to the zoo, we're going to see every animal, we're going to do it. But make your kids imagine, oh, what do you think they're saying to each other? What do you think they're thinking right now? Like, just creating imagination within children doesn't have to be hard. We always make it has to be this most complex thing. And I think it's sometimes really easy just to be like, what do you think they're doing?
All right, well, we hope you enjoyed this episode of Movies That Matter. Please sympathize with us sometimes when we have to watch some bad movies. We still try to give you good content. Check us out at Movies Matter Pod on Twitter, Movies Matter Pod on Facebook, our website, moviesthatmatterpodcast.com, and let us know what you thought. Remember, movies matter.
And so do you.
We'll see you next time.